was a windy night in October. I was on a road trip by myself. The drive had its moments, but I finally pulled up to the hotel where I was supposed to stay. As I walked in, a woman behind the front desk frowned and said, "Sorry, we don't have a reservation for you." Confused, I insisted I had the right place, but as I dug through my things, my heart sank. I had forgotten to book the room. The woman looked sympathetic but reminded me that the hotel was fully booked. She suggested I try a motel a few blocks down. I hesitated, never having stayed in a motel before, but I had no choice. I couldn't camp out in my car. When I arrived at the motel, it felt old and creepy. The neon sign flickered above me, and the air felt thick with weird tension. I took a deep breath and checked in. The room was small, with peeling wallpaper and a thin layer of dust covering everything. As night crept in, I hoped I could just fall asleep and forget where I was, but that didn't happen. I tried to relax, but then the noises started. At first, I thought it was the wind or maybe some loose piping. It came from the wall next to the TV, faint but persistent. My heart raced. I couldn't just ignore it. So I got up and went to investigate. What I found left me frozen in place. There were tiny holes in the wall, and through one of them, I spotted something shiny. I squinted and realized there were cameras hidden in the outlets. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back, my mind racing. Was I being watched? I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed the police, my hands shaking. As I explained the situation, I rushed to the front desk, but it was empty. No one was there. The police assured me they would send someone over, and in the meantime, they tried to find me a safer place to stay. I sat in my car, the engine humming softly, trying to calm my racing heart as I waited for the police to arrive. When they finally pulled up, relief washed over me, but the unease lingered. They took my report seriously, listening closely as I recounted the strange sounds and the terrifying discovery in the wall. After they finished their questions, they worked quickly to find me a safer place to stay for the night. That felt like a small victory, but the fear of what had just happened wouldn't leave me. It was surreal. I always heard stories about creepy motels and things that go bump in the night, but I never imagined that I would actually find myself in such a situation. From that night on, I decided I would always be cautious when traveling. Hotels and motels might seem harmless, but I knew better now. When I did have to stay in a hotel, I made it a point to inspect every corner. I checked the outlets for hidden cameras and scrutinized the walls for any signs of something lurking behind them. I couldn't shake the feeling that there could be a watchful eye where I least expected it. That experience was one of the strangest and scariest of my life, but it taught me to always be aware of my surroundings. I'd rather be paranoid than a victim again. It was Halloween weekend, and I made plans to go camping. I stopped by a local restaurant for a bite to eat, and since I had only moved here a couple of months ago, I asked the waitress if there were any great camping spots nearby. She seemed a bit odd about it and warned me to be cautious in the woods. "Be careful out there," she said, her voice serious. "The woods can be strange at night." I nodded, but I didn't think much of it. After dinner, I drove to a campsite I found on my phone. It was in the forest, and as I entered, the trees felt thick and close. I parked, set up my tent, and felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The sun started to set, and I lit a small fire to keep warm. But then, as night fell, the woods began to change. The sounds around me grew louder, the wind howled through the trees, and I heard strange noises in the dark. I tried to ignore it, but soon I felt like I wasn't alone. I put out the fire and crawled into my sleeping bag, hoping to fall asleep quickly. But sleep wouldn't come. I kept hearing someone moving outside my tent. My heart started to race. I tried to convince myself it was just animals, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I lay there, frozen in fear, and then I heard a low voice whispering my name. I bolted upright in my sleeping bag, my heart pounding. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound brave, but there was no answer, just silence and the faint sound of something moving again. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent slowly, shining the light outside. At first, I saw nothing but trees and shadows, but then I spotted a figure standing a little way off in the dark. It was a man. He looked dirty, with wild hair and a strange smile. My breath caught in my throat. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice shaking. He stepped closer, and I could see his eyes glinting in the light. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a low voice. Panic shot through me. I zipped up my tent quickly and looked around for my phone. I needed to call for help. I fumbled with my phone, but there was no signal. I felt trapped. I couldn't just sit there. I had to get out. I decided to get dressed quickly and make a run for my car. I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, my heart racing. The man was still there, watching me from the shadows. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to sound tougher than I felt, but instead of moving away, he grinned wider and started walking towards me. I turned and ran. I sprinted toward my car as fast as I could, the sound of footsteps behind me. I finally reached my car, tore the door open, and jumped inside, except locking it just in time. My heart pounded as I turned the key in the ignition. It roared to life, and I slammed it into drive. I sped out of the campsite and onto the road, my hands shaking on the wheel. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but I didn't see him. My breath came in gasps as I drove, terrified of what might happen next. After a while, I finally spotted the lights of a police station up ahead. I pulled in and jumped out of the car, running to the door. A police officer looked up and saw me clearly shaken. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern on his face. I told him everything, about the man in the woods and how I felt like I was being hunted. The officer listened carefully, nodding. "Let me help you," he said. He called for backup and asked me to wait inside while they investigated the campsite. After a short while, 2 officers returned. "We checked the area, but we didn't find anyone," one of them said. "But it's best that you stay here tonight. We can keep you safe." I felt relief wash over me. I knew I had made the right choice by coming here. The officers assured me that I was safe now. I would never forget the strange night in the woods, but now I had learned to trust my instincts, and I knew next time I would be more careful. It was late at night, and I was driving across the country from California to New York. It was the first week of October, and I decided to go on a road trip by myself. I had been pushing through for hours, fueled by coffee, but as the clock ticked towards midnight, fatigue started to creep in. I pulled over at a small rest area to stretch my legs and clear my mind. The night air was cold and still. I took a deep breath, wishing I could shake off the tightness in my chest. I glanced around, and for a moment, everything felt fine. But as I got back into my car, I noticed something strange. A figure standing at the edge of the parking lot, partially hidden by the trees. I couldn't quite make out who it was, but something about the way they stood still made me uneasy. I decided to hit the road again, hoping some movement would shake off the lingering feeling of dread. As I drove, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but there it was, a pair of headlights following me a distance back. I tried to convince myself it was just another traveler, but the longer it stayed behind me, the more paranoid I became. Minutes turned into hours, and the figure remained. I changed lanes, sped up, and even slowed down, but the car stayed right there, always at a distance. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Was this person just going the same way, or was I really being followed? I pulled into a gas station, hoping to escape the eerie feeling that clung to me. After filling up my tank, I glanced around, scanning the area for any sign of the car behind me. For a moment, I felt relief when I didn't see it. But as I got ready to leave, I noticed a shadow near the entrance of the station. The same figure stood there, watching me. Panic surged through my body. I rushed back to my car, heart pounding. I tried not to look directly at them, but I could sense them moving closer. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and immediately drove away, adrenaline flooding my veins. The road was still dark, and my mind raced with thoughts. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see those headlights again. And then, just like that, they appeared. The car had returned, tailing me once more. I felt trapped, like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I took a sharp turn onto a deserted side road, hoping to lose them. My breath quickened as I drove faster, the tires screeching on the gravel. I glanced back, and the headlights were still there, close, but not close enough to see who was behind the wheel. Fear bubbled inside me, and I fought to keep my focus on the road ahead. Just then, my car hit a bump, and I lost control for a moment. I swerved onto the shoulder, just barely avoiding a tree. My heart dropped as I regained control, but the figure was still right behind me. In that moment, I realized I needed to confront whatever was happening. I pulled over to the side of the road and turned off my engine, the night wrapping around me. I waited, holding my breath, hoping the car would pass by. The headlights slowed, then stopped just behind me. I took a deep breath and opened my door, ready to face whatever was lurking there. To my surprise, as I stepped outside, the other car's engine turned off, and the driver stepped out, a woman, a look of concern on her face. "Are you all right?" she called out, stepping cautiously towards me. As I stood there, uncertainty gnawed at my gut. Although the woman seemed friendly and genuinely concerned, the way she had followed me for so long still sent chills down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something just wasn't right, and I didn't want to take any chances. "Thank you for stopping," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I really appreciate it, but I think I need to keep moving." I didn't want to be rude or ungrateful, but the tension was palpable. My instincts were screaming at me to get back on the road. She nodded, her expression softening as if she understood my apprehension. "Of course, just be safe out there, okay?" As I climbed back into my car, I felt a mix of relief and lingering unease. I started the engine and glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. She stood there watching me, but thankfully she stayed put. I could hardly believe that someone had followed me for so long, and the thought sent a shiver down my spine. I put the car in gear and drove away, eager to put some distance between us.